Some voices aren't just for listening, they're for feeling. Voices that compel you to stop in the middle of whatever life is throwing at you and ask, where does this magical sound come from? It is a voice as clear as a spring, yet as sinewy as the roots of an ancient tree clinging to Irish soil. A whisper that can erupt into a mournful yodel, a cry that holds the pain of an entire people while soothing the most broken of hearts. That voice unmistakably belongs to Dolores O'Riordan, the petite goddess of the band the Cranberries, who wrapped the very soul of Ireland in her sound and sent it across the world. Her music became the soundtrack to first loves, late-night drives, and the quiet, reflective moments of an entire generation. We were captivated by that voice, treating it as a peaceful sanctuary for our souls. But we rarely knew that for the artist herself, that sanctuary was sometimes a battlefield. We saw a fierce artist on stage, an ethereal figure in music videos. But behind the microphone, hidden from the stage lights, was a woman whose life was a complex tapestry, woven from breathtaking highs and devastating lows. So what happens when a voice that can soothe the entire world cannot extinguish the storm in its own soul? This is not just the story of a rock star. This is the tragic journey of an angel from Limerick, a fragile voice carrying the weight of a divine gift. To understand Dolores, you have to understand the Ireland that created her. She was born in 1971 in Ballybricken, a rural pocket of County Limerick. This was not the modern tech hub Ireland of today. This was a country still finding its footing, grappling with economic hardship and the deep sectarian wounds of the Troubles in the north. Limerick in particular had a gritty reputation, unfairly nicknamed Stab City, during a period of intense gang violence and unemployment. It was a place of stark contrasts, breathtaking green landscapes dotted with ancient castles, existing alongside depressed urban centers. Life was governed by two powerful forces, the Catholic Church and the local community. It was a society of tight-knit families and traditional values, where everyone knew everyone else's business. Dolores was the youngest of 7 children, the baby of the O'Riordan clan. Her father, Terence, was a farm laborer left unable to work after a motorbike accident, and her mother, Eileen, was a school caterer. They were a devoutly Catholic family, and music was an early escape. From the age of 5, Dolores was singing. She played the piano and the church organ, her voice already showing a rare and haunting quality. She was, by her own admission, her mother's little queen, adored and protected. But that protection couldn't shield her from everything. When she was just 8 years old, a fire destroyed the family home, a deeply traumatic event that foreshadowed the instability that would mark her life. More insidiously, a darkness was creeping into her world that she would not speak of for decades. Within her own community, a trusted figure began to abuse her, a secret she would carry like a stone in her heart, shaping her view of the world, her relationships, and herself in ways she was too young to comprehend. This profound betrayal, hidden beneath the surface of a seemingly normal country childhood, would become the silent, agonizing source of so much of her later pain. By her late teens, Dolores was a young woman with a restless spirit, writing her own songs as a way to process a world she felt increasingly at odds with. She was introverted, preferring to sit in her room with her keyboard than socialize. In 1989, a few local lads in Limerick, brothers Noel and Mike Hogan and Fergal Lawler, had formed a band called The Cranberries Saw Us. Their singer had just left, but before he did, he mentioned he knew a girl who could write and sing. Her name was Dolores O'Riordan. Noel Hogan recalls the day she showed up for the audition. This small, quiet girl dressed in a tracksuit, clutching a keyboard. He played her a chord progression he'd been working on, a simple, jangly little melody. She listened, took the tape home, and returned the following week. What she had done with those simple chords was nothing short of alchemy. She had written the lyrics and vocal melody for a song that would one day conquer the world. The song was Linger. The band was floored. Her voice was unlike anything they had ever heard. That unique mix of a soft Gaelic lilt and a powerful Celtic wail, the yodel, was her signature from the very beginning. They immediately knew she was the missing piece. The band shortened their name to the Cranberries, and with Dolores at the helm, a new sound was born. But success was not immediate. They played to empty rooms, struggled to get noticed outside of Ireland, and their first EP was a commercial flop. Their record label was on the verge of dropping them. Their debut album, Everybody Else Is Doing It, So Why Can't We?, was released in 1993 to little fanfare in Europe. The band was dejected, believing their dream was over before it had truly begun. But then a strange thing happened. A copy of the album made its way across the Atlantic to a college radio station in the United States. A DJ put Linger on the airwaves, and the phones lit up. American audiences, unburdened by the hype and disappointment that had surrounded the band in the UK, heard the music for what it was: fresh, authentic, and emotionally resonant. MTV picked up the music video, and suddenly the Cranberries were huge in America. The momentum bounced back to Europe, and the album shot up the charts worldwide. Dolores O'Riordan, the shy girl from rural Limerick, was now a global superstar. Songs like Linger and Dreams captured a universal feeling of youthful yearning and vulnerability. Dolores's lyrics were often deceptively simple, yet they spoke directly to the heart. She wrote about her first kiss, her first heartbreak, with an earnestness that was a stark contrast to the cynical grunge scene that was dominating the airwaves at the time. Her onstage presence began to transform. The initially timid singer who would hide behind her hair began to command the stage, her movements as expressive and unconventional as her voice. She was a whirlwind of energy, a captivating pixie with a warrior's cry. Just as the world thought it had the Cranberries figured out as a band of bittersweet love songs, they unleashed Zombie. In March 1993, two young boys, Jonathan Ball and Tim Perry, were killed by an IRA bomb in Warrington, England. The senseless violence shook Dolores to her core. Back in her small Limerick apartment, she picked up her acoustic guitar and channeled her anger and grief into a new song. It was a howl of protest, a visceral reaction to the decades of conflict that had haunted her homeland. The song was a massive departure. It was heavy, aggressive, with distorted guitars and a thunderous rhythm. And at its center was Dolores's voice, transformed into an instrument of pure, unadulterated rage and sorrow. In your head, they are fighting," she wailed, the yodel now a cry of anguish. When she presented the song to the band, they knew it was special, but their record label was terrified. They urged her not to release it, fearing it was too political, too aggressive, and would ruin their career. Dolores refused to back down. For her, it wasn't a political statement as much as a human one, a plea for peace from a mother's perspective. Zombie was released in 1994 and became their biggest hit. The music video, which intercut footage of the band with images of children in the war-torn streets of Northern Ireland, was powerful and controversial. It cemented Dolores O'Riordan not just as a pop star, but as a voice of conscience. She had proven that she was more than just a singer of pretty melodies. She was a songwriter with something vital to say. The success was monumental, but the pressure was crushing. The relentless cycle of touring, recording, and promotion began to take a severe toll. Dolores felt her life was no longer her own. She was a product, a personality, a voice that belonged to everyone. This loss of control manifested in a devastating way. She developed anorexia. In her own words, it was my way of feeling like I was in control of something. While the world saw a famously slender rock star, the reality was a woman starving herself to cope with overwhelming pressure. She once said, "I became a caged bird." The childhood trauma she had buried for so long was also beginning to fester. The fame, the constant scrutiny, the lack of privacy, it all served as a trigger for a deep, unresolved pain. She was suffering from severe depression, a condition that was misunderstood and often dismissed in the public eye at the time. She felt isolated, unable to connect with the happy-go-lucky image that was expected of her. Her relationships were also under strain. She had married Don Burton, the former tour manager for Duran Duran, in 1994, and they would go on to have 3 children. She adored her family, and they became her anchor in a turbulent world. To escape the relentless media attention, they moved to a sprawling farm in Ontario, Canada, where Dolores could live in relative anonymity. She needed to breathe. In 2003, after selling over 40 million albums, the Cranberries announced they were taking a hiatus. The machine had finally ground to a halt. For Dolores, this period was about healing and rediscovery. She released 2 solo albums, Are You Listening? In 2007 and No Baggage in 2009. The titles themselves were telling. These records were deeply personal, raw, and therapeutic. She sang about her depression, her recovery from the eating disorder, and the joys of motherhood. It was the sound of a woman trying to piece herself back together, away from the expectations that came with her famous band. One of the most profound revelations from this time was a medical diagnosis that finally gave a name to the chaos she had felt for so long. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. In a later interview, she spoke about the relief that came with this understanding. She said, "I'm in a place where I'm feeling pretty good. I've been a bit of a cranky pants, but I'm going to be fine. It's good to get it out in the open." The diagnosis didn't cure her, but it recontextualized her life. The extreme mood swings, the periods of deep depression followed by manic energy, the impulsive behavior, it all finally made sense. It wasn't a character flaw, it was a clinical condition. This period also brought a new creative outlet. She joined a project called DARK, a collaboration with former Smiths bassist Andy Rourke and producer Ole Koretsky. It allowed her to explore a darker, more electronic sound, proving her artistic curiosity was as strong as ever. And in 2009, to the delight of fans everywhere, the Cranberries reunited. The chemistry was still there. The joy of playing together had returned. It seemed like a new, more stable chapter was beginning. But the ghosts of the past were never far away. Even with a diagnosis and a better understanding of her mental health, the struggle was a daily reality. This private battle exploded into public view in November 2014. On a flight from New York to Shannon, Ireland, Dolores had what was described as an air rage incident. Reports claimed she became disruptive, refused to take her seat, and allegedly stamped on a flight attendant's foot. When the plane landed, she was arrested on the tarmac, where she resisted arrest, headbutting one officer and spitting at another. The headlines were brutal. Cranberries singer's meltdown, rock star arrested. To the outside world, it looked like another case of celebrity entitlement, but the truth was far more tragic and complex. In court, the details that emerged painted a picture not of a malicious criminal, but of a woman in the throes of a severe mental health crisis. Her lawyers explained that she had been in a fragile state, suffering from paranoia and hypomania linked to her bipolar disorder. She had recently separated from her husband of 20 years, and the stress had been immense. Dolores pleaded guilty, and the judge showed remarkable compassion. Recognizing her genuine remorse and documented mental health issues, he spared her a criminal conviction, ordering her instead to pay a fine to the court's poor box. In a letter read to the court, Dolores stated she was mortified and embarrassed by her behavior, offering an unreserved apology to all involved. The incident was a painful public exposure of her deepest vulnerabilities. It was a cry for help that was tragically misinterpreted by many as a fall from grace. It highlighted the immense difficulty of managing a severe mental illness, especially under the unblinking eye of public scrutiny. In the years that followed, Dolores seemed to find a renewed sense of purpose. The Cranberries released a new album, Something Else, in 2017, featuring acoustic and orchestral versions of their classic songs. The arrangements gave new life and a poignant, reflective quality to the music. Her voice, now richer and imbued with the weight of her life experience, had never sounded more beautiful. She spoke openly in interviews about her struggles, her recovery, and her hopes for the future. She seemed to have reached a place of acceptance, using her platform to chip away at the stigma surrounding mental illness. Her legacy was already secure. She was the voice that put Irish alternative rock on the map. Her unique vocal style influenced a generation of singers, from Florence Welch to Amy Lee. But more than that, she gave voice to the unspoken feelings of millions. She sang of love and loss, of anger and hope, with an authenticity that was undeniable. She showed that strength and vulnerability could coexist, that a whisper could be as powerful as a scream. Her music reminded us that even in the darkest of times, there is beauty to be found. She was living proof that one could endure immense pain and still create something beautiful for the world. In January 2018, Dolores flew to London for a short recording session. She was excited, full of creative energy. She was scheduled to work on new material for the Cranberries and to collaborate with the band Bad Wolves on a cover of Zombie. On the evening of January 14th, she left an enthusiastic voicemail for her friend and record label executive, saying how much she loved the Bad Wolves version of her song and how eager she was to record her vocals the next day. It was the last time anyone would hear from her. On the morning of January 15th, 2018, Dolores O'Riordan was found unconscious in her room at the London Hilton on Park Lane. She was pronounced dead at the scene. She was only 46 years old. The world reacted with shock and disbelief. An outpouring of grief came from fans, fellow musicians, and dignitaries, including the President of Ireland. For weeks, the cause of her death remained a mystery, leading to painful speculation. The official inquest in September finally provided an answer. It was a tragic accident. Dolores, who had been drinking, had accidentally drowned in the bathtub. The coroner ruled out any intent of self-harm, describing it as a tragic accident. There was no foul play, no final act of despair, just a heartbreaking, mundane accident that stole a magnificent talent from the world far too soon. The girl with the voice of an angel had gone home. Her funeral was held in her native Ballybricken, the same small town where her story began. As her coffin was carried into the church, Ave Maria, a duet she had recorded with Luciano Pavarotti, filled the air. It was a final fitting tribute to a voice that seemed to bridge the gap between the earthly and the divine. The story of Dolores O'Riordan is one of painful contradictions. She was a global rock icon who craved the quiet of the countryside. She had a voice that could fill stadiums, but was, at her core, a shy and private person. She created songs of hope and resilience while battling her own profound demons. Her life reminds us that success is no shield against suffering, and that the brightest lights can often hide the deepest shadows. But her story is not defined by its tragic end. It is defined by the incredible art she created in spite of her pain. It is defined by her courage to speak her truth, both in her music and later about her personal struggles. She left behind a catalog of songs that will continue to comfort, inspire, and resonate for generations to come. Dolores O'Riordan was a rare and precious talent, a fragile soul with a warrior's voice, who sang her truth however painful, and in doing so, left a permanent mark on the heart of the world. Her voice is not silent. It just lives on now, in the ether, forever lingering. And that wraps up today's video. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like, leave a comment with your feedback, and subscribe to stay updated on upcoming videos. Appreciate you watching.